Welcome back to another Heart to Heart with Statton. Today, while I go over today's subject, I'll be doing a challenge that I created for myself, and that is to go through a 3 player group recommended dungeon by myself. Now, I'll explain to you how I came about doing this in a moment, but first, I would like to say I know this is kind of a this not everybody's interested in the subject I'm going to cover over. So I today, but I've made a promise in a previous video that I would do it, and to me, this seems like the most appropriate time to do it is when going through this dungeon. And if you're not interested in it, I hope the gameplay itself will be entertaining enough. And if it isn't, well, I've got other videos that might catch your eye. Then don't let this video scare you from the other ones, both before this one and after. But anyways, what gave me the idea to do the dungeon really quick is I was told, even though it says 3 player recommended, it oftentimes makes you join a queue or a QA group that has 5 players, and these are usually level cap dungeons. Well, someone I I grouped with actually found out that if you make your group private, you don't have to obey those rules. That you can show up in the dungeon with less players. So I'm decided I'm gonna do a small experiment. I'm gonna make a queue group, set it to private, and let it be me and me alone. And if that works, I'll go through this dungeon, and my challenge is to go through this dungeon all the way through without dying once. Which may not seem like a challenge considering that I'm level 80, but there's a few things to consider. One, I'm not afraid to admit to this. At this current moment, I'm a weak level 80. Uh, Maxing your level does not make you all powerful, and the armor and weapons I have are, well, they're not that good, nor are they enchanted yet. I got level 80 stuff, but it's pretty basic stuff. There's a lot of other level 80 stuff that could put what I currently have to shame. And I only have 2 boons to boost my power up even further. So if I do set foot in this dungeon, I'll be dropped down to a level 12. So my regular stats will be dropped, but if I understand correctly, I'll still get the power boost from my level 80 weapons and armor, though they're basic at best, as I pointed out. And well, and with I still get a power up from the 2 boons, I believe. But since I only have 2, and you're probably wondering, Statton, how could you have only 2 boons when you're level 80? Well, I'm kind of weird in the sense that I wanted to max out Statton's level before doing the actual campaigns. I thought that was intelligent at the time, but right now I'm starting to kind of wish I hadn't done that I hadn't waited. But, it's the whole live and learn thing. So, now, before I get too long winded here, because I've almost covered over 4 or 5 minutes just explaining to you all this, and I haven't even gotten to the subject yet. I mentioned in a previous video about critiquing movies and how it's okay to like movies even if you recognize their flaws, and Star Wars was a big subject in regards to that video. I made a promise that I'd explain to you what my beliefs were on the whole bringing balance to the Force, which seems to be the main part of the storyline, at least in regards to the movies. And well, I think I'll go ahead and use this video to explain what my views are on that. And bear in mind, I haven't heard anybody else explain it quite like I have, so I don't know if there's others that feel the same way I do, or if there's anyone that would agree with me on it, which, if you don't agree, that's fine. I got no problem with that. That's okay. But in order for my answer to make sense, I have to go over a few things. Oh, look, it actually let me in. Well, here we go. Anyways, I'd have to cover over some of the things that people do believe bringing balance to the Force is. There's the first and most basic thing, which is they believed Anakin, who is the chosen one, who is also the most powerful Force sensitive and Force wielder to exist in the storyline. They believed that most people believed at the time in the beginning that the bringing balance to the Force is destroying the Sith and bringing him into extinction, and there are others that believe nope, the dark side and the light side have to coexist together. So a lot of people believe he brought balance to the Force when he made it 2 Jedi and 2 Sith existing at a time. I don't quite agree with either one of those beliefs. There's even a small group that believe he brought balance to the Force just by killing the father, the son, and the daughter during the Clone Wars when they arrived on Mortis. And while there is a little bit of truth to that, because the father even did say, "You brought balance to the Force on Mortis," but then he says, "I believe you'll bring balance to the Force in general." For me now that I don't agree with either one of these beliefs. Not that and I say this bearing in mind I could be wrong, and I could be wrong on what my beliefs are in bringing balance to the Force is, but I don't believe the light and the dark are really meant to coincide with each other. I mean, in an out-of-universe answer, yeah, that it makes sense because in terms of keeping the storyline going, because if the dark side were completely destroyed, well, that would end the Star Wars storyline once and for all, because to destroy evil altogether and make the entire galaxy a perfect place where there is no evil to fight against, well, there's no story to continue then. That would be the end. They live happily ever after. So yes, as an out-of-story answer, it makes sense to make it so that they have to coexist, but as an in-story answer, it doesn't add up, because the dark side's what threw the Force off balance to begin with. I believe the Force being thrown off balance wasn't a one event trigger thing. I think it was something that took thousands and thousands of years to be thrown off balance. In fact, I'll go as far as to say I believe when the prophecy came around, first of all, that the Force was not thrown off balance just yet. Which to me, this actually adds to the story, because that means when the Jedi received that prophecy, they had no idea what the prophecy was really talking about. And now, like I said, I could be wrong, and I know my idea here I'm throwing out does not exist in Legends, and Legends does cover over the beginning and everything, to the best of my knowledge. But Legends, let's face it, no matter how much you want it to be canon, by now it's not canon. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, doesn't mean you can't favor it above canon, but if it's not, but Legends isn't recognized as canon, so the storyline isn't going to be built around Legends. They may take some things from Legends and add them to canon, but let's face it, if they were going to keep everything in Legends exact, they wouldn't have made them Legends to begin with. If you're wondering what I'm doing really quick in the dungeon, since I'm not dealing with a party that wants to rush through it, I'm going to take the extra time to explore as much of the dungeon as I can and see if I can uncover anything that I couldn't before, because I'd have to keep up with the group. So I believe the Sith coming into existence was the first step in the Force being thrown off balance. the birth of the dark side, if you will. And while some people would say, well, the Sith aren't exactly the first dark side wielders, and while that is true, I believe they at the time of their existence were the most powerful dark side wielders, and they are, in fact, their existence is what started the Force off balance. And that was just the beginning. I believe over time, as the Jedi started developing holding the Galactic Senate and the Republic to almost as high as a standard as the Force themselves, because they claim that they want to fulfill the will of the Force, but it seemed like during the time of the movies that they held the Senate to such a high standard that they would even put its will above the will of the Force itself, and they didn't even notice it. So I believe that too is what contributed to the Force being thrown off balance. Darth Bane also made it worse by bringing about the rule of two, making it so the Sith were hidden from the Jedi and they were growing in strength, while the Jedi were in a lot of ways deceiving themselves. You see, a lot of people give the Last Jedi version of Luke a lot of flack, but if you pay attention to the prequels, you'll notice that there's a lot of truth in his words. I don't think he should have taken it to the extent of giving up on the Jedi Order. I think what he could have done was use this knowledge, this realization of his, to actually make up for the previous Jedi's mistake, and just bring the Jedi back to the way they were supposed to be, and not the modern day Jedi that we saw in the prequels. Now, let me think for a moment. I believe the final step to having the Force being way thrown off balance and being consumed by the dark side was the fact that the Jedi got involved with the Clone Wars. Mace Windu himself said at the beginning of Attack of the Clones that Jedi are keepers of the peace, not soldiers, and yet they turn around and became generals, which they are not supposed to be generals. So they're fighting wars. Now, I have a game for the Wii called the Clone Wars Lightsaber Duels, and it's done in the same way that the Clone Wars show takes place. Now, when you pit two characters together in that game, you hear their dialogue, and you hear a lot of dialogue that you don't hear in the show. And if you pit Mace Windu against Plo Koon as they practice their lightsaber dueling skills against each other, you'll hear Mace Windu say, "This war has made soldiers of us all." And he also says, "It's dangerous for so many Padawans to get involved into the war before they're ready." These two things, to me, though they were not said in the actual Clone War show, they did make me think. War is something that can't be avoided. World peace is never going to exist because the world isn't going to agree to it. You're always going to have those people that disagree, and those disagreements will erupt into wars, and unfortunately there's going to have to be soldiers that'll fight in those wars. And now, war does tend to change people. Not always for the worse, but let's face facts. Even those who are on the good side, they're the ones that reap the less of the reward than the ones that they're fighting for, because in the end, war can end up scarring them. I'm not anti-war. Don't get me wrong with that. Like I said, war. I would like to live in a world where there isn't any war, but that's unrealistic right there. That's unrealistic. And as far as wars are concerned, I'm always for the good side to win. So no, I'm not anti-war and all that, and I don't believe when people go to war, they're just warmongering evil people like some people are led to believe. But there's no denying it. You can't avoid it. Now, I believe the Jedi were changing as a result of the war also. And I honestly believe they were changing in such a way where if they had won the Clone Wars, there would have been no going back for them. They couldn't go back to training the old way before the times of the war. They would have remained soldiers, and as such, when they would train their new generation of Padawans, they would teach them their general ways more than their Jedi ways, and they wouldn't even notice. They wouldn't notice because they were so used to it, to the war happening. They were so used to being generals that I believe they would have forgotten what it had been like what it was like for them to be Jedi before the war. I shouldn't say Jedis. I mean, Jedi is plural and singular. And well, I think the dark side of the Jedi actually started the show at its darkest, ironically, in Revenge of the Sith, where Mace Windu was talking to Yoda, and he said, he considered actually having the Jedi take over the Senate itself, and this meant they would have the emergency powers that Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, had. They would be able to have control over everything, and given the situation, nobody in the Senate would have it put to a vote or have the ability to vote because the emergency powers would still be in play. It's just the Jedi would have them, which may not seem like a bad thing at the time, but given the changes I'm pointing out to you that the Jedi were going through, it does make me wonder, would the Jedi be any more willing to relinquish that power as Palpatine would have been? I don't think they would have. I think deep down, once they took control of the Senate and they killed, or let me give you a what if scenario just to make it what I'm about to say easier. Let's say Anakin didn't stop Mace Windu and Mace Windu actually ended up killing Palpatine. The final Sith would have been destroyed. The Emperor, or he would have never became Emperor, but balance would not have been brought to the Force because then the Jedi would have taken over the Senate just as he had suggested. I don't think they would have been willing to let go of it because they would see this newfound peace as something credited to them, and they would probably start thinking thoughts like, well, if we keep control of the Senate, this will never happen again. And I believe over time, the dark side would have grown in the Jedi, and they would just have over time become a replacement order for the Sith. I truly believe that. So in the end, what, in my opinion, had to happen for Anakin to bring balance to the Force? Well, as much as people are probably going to hate to hear this, I believe a similar but not exact belief to those that thought the same number of Jedi and the same number of Sith had to exist. I believe both the Jedi Order and the Sith Order had to be completely destroyed and everything start anew all over again. I believe Anakin killing all the Jedi was a huge step to bringing balance to the Force, though ironically it was actually making the dark side grow more and more. But by the time Return of the Jedi happened, all the Jedi were killed off, except for Luke, but Luke at the time didn't count because he was still a Jedi in training. And all that was left was Vader, Luke, Vader, and Palpatine, aka the Emperor. I believe when Luke defeated Vader in that lightsaber duel, he became the new Jedi and the beginning of the New Order. But when Vader turned good again to save Luke, that's when Anakin came back and he defeated Vader in a way of speaking, in a manner of speaking, I guess. But then when he killed Palpatine, he destroyed the final Sith. Now, does this mean Anakin succeeded in bringing balance to the Force? If you had asked me that before the sequel trilogy, I would have said yes. I would have said that was the final move that finally brought balance to the Force. Not so sure now, especially since it seems like they're bringing Darth Sidious back for Episode 9. And as I mentioned to you before in that previous video, I didn't like the Legends series where they kept bringing Sidious back over and over again. To me, that was just seemed like they were running out of ideas. I don't know. And I was slightly disappointed in a very similar way to find out they were bringing Sidious back for 9, although it seems like a lot of people are excited about the idea. But here's how I think they could bring him back without it running into this same problem that the Legends continuity had. I think if it were if it had been secretly in Sidious's plan to die at the end of Episode 6 this whole time, and here's why I say that. It is believed that only Jedi or those who are pure in the Force can become Force Ghost, and that dark side wielders cannot become Force Ghosts. They can leave spiritual imprints that are localized to either objects or tombs, but even those aren't real spirits, because even Yoda said they're illusions. So it would actually be epic to me if somehow Sidious managed to succeed in doing something that was deemed impossible at one point, which is for him to be the first and only dark side user to actually succeed in becoming a legit Force Ghost. And why is this important? I believe this is important because if he wanted to do something like possess Kylo Ren, because Kylo Ren, even though his last name is Solo, he is in the Skywalker bloodline, which means his Force abilities are right up there with Luke and Anakin. So it would make perfect sense for Sidious to want to abandon his old and decrepit body for a younger, more powerful, Force-sensitive body, especially with all the knowledge he already has. And one thing that could also make the story more epic is if they bring Anakin's Force Ghost back, and as it turns out, it's as a Force Ghost Anakin's meant to bring balance to the Force. How is this exactly? I'm not entirely sure myself, but the fact of the matter is, and I'm going to bring up something George Lucas said. He said the midi-chlorians, or whatever you call them, or how Force-sensitive beings work, is the Force flows through living matter. So when Anakin became Darth Vader, he was actually weaker in the Force than he was when he was Anakin, because a lot of his body was burnt and he had robotic limbs and needed a respirator. With less of his physical being, he had less of the Force to work with. So if I remember right, his force abilities either decreased by 40% or he's left with 40%. I'm not sure which, but it is obvious that even though he was still powerful, he was not as powerful, and as a living being could not reach the full potential that he could have reached otherwise. Well, anyways, it is proven that as a Force Ghost, you are far more powerful than you ever were as a living person. So, to me, Anakin as a Force Ghost would be even more powerful than what he would have been even if he hadn't become the machine known as Darth Vader. And with that said, I could probably see one of two things happening. Either Kylo Ren possesses, Darth Sidious's spirit possesses Kylo Ren, which would be kind of ingenious considering that his powers, along with Anakin and Luke's, are supposed to surpass Sidious, or Rey somehow defeats him, which I'm not entirely sure how that's supposed to be. But then I'm kind of half and half. I believe they should have given her training and a character development, but at the same time, due to the fact that they put episode 7 and 8 back to back with no time gap, I can understand for timing reasons that they couldn't do that. Out of storyline answer, not in storyline answer. So either that happens, or one of two things, or Sidious possesses Kylo Ren and somehow Rey drives his spirit out of Kylo Ren, and Anakin's Force Ghost goes into some sort of spiritual battle with Sidious's Force Ghost and destroys Sidious's spirit completely. And as a Force Ghost, Anakin fulfills his prophecy and brings balance to the Force. That's how I see it. Now, I say all this bearing in mind I could be wrong. Maybe the idea is stupid. Maybe I'll look back on this video and think, boy, was I an idiot. But it's what I truly believe. I mean, right at this current time. If you agree with me, or if you disagree with me, let me know and explain to me why you disagree. And if you think it's stupid, feel free to let me know. Trust me, I'm not going to be hurt by it. I'm actually interested in hearing everyone's thoughts. Like I said, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe destroying the Sith was enough, or maybe bringing the same number of Force wielders on both sides was the case after all, or maybe making the dark and light side coexist is the balance. I don't believe it is, or at least I don't agree with it at this current time, but that doesn't mean that isn't the case. I could be wrong. And what do you know? I had to heal myself quite a few times, but I actually made it through this dungeon by myself without dying once. Oh, gotta grab those dropped items. Okay, don't fall down. Okay, good. And I do apologize if a long-winded subject for this video was just boring or irritating. That wasn't my intention. I just wanted to get this out of the way so I just wouldn't have to do it later. When I make a promise to cover over a subject, I usually try to keep that promise. Okay, so now that I explored and grabbed some extra items, I'm going to show you people who don't know what they do. Happens. Okay, you unlock a treasure chest, which doesn't have a lot, but I'm the type of person that believes every little bit helps. Let's see. Drop all the items here. Uh-oh. Apparently, I overlooked some items in this dungeon. Oh well, live and learn. At least now you know what those extra items are for, in case you've ran past them and you wondered what they were but wanted to keep up with the group. Now you know what those items do. So just as a reminder, not all my videos are going to be me discussing Star Wars. In fact, this might be the last one. It may not, but like I said, it's connected to the Star Wars Heart to Heart with Statton because of the promise I made. And I feel like all the serious subjects I want to cover over, this wasn't the appropriate video to do it because, for one thing, I was too distracted by the dungeon itself, and I didn't think I would think clearly enough. And as you know, I kind of had to backtrack a few times with this particular subject. Anyways, with that said, if you don't like this video, that's fine. I just want to remind all of you that I plan on covering over every subject that presses on my mind. In fact, I'll go ahead and say this right now. If there's any subjects you want me to cover over or look into, post the request in the comment section. I may, like I said, I don't pretend to know everything, but I'm always more than happy to cover over subjects to the best of my knowledge as well as I can, to offer up help and advice, and hopefully stir everybody's mind up in ways that they never really thought about before. Okay, I'm pretty much just gonna head back up here now. Whoa, I made this video past my limit. That's okay. An extra 3 to 4 minutes. I don't think it's gonna hurt that much. I don't know. Anyways, well, that's the... Hold on. Whoop. Okay, here we go. Well, that's the video for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. My name is Statton. Like, share, and subscribe. And y'all have yourselves a wonderful day.